A $500,000 house used to mean you'd made it. Today, it just means you showed up at the wrong time. In 2026, a $500,000 home isn't a luxury listing. It's the default. And that should make you uncomfortable. Because most people watching this already know the punchline. Salaries didn't move like prices did. And yet somehow, houses did. My name is Philip. I spend most of my time breaking down money stories that look simple on the surface and brutal once you slow them down. This one matters right now, not because you're about to buy a house, but because this question quietly decides who gets ahead in the next decade and who never does. Who can actually afford a $500,000 home in 2026? Not who wants one, not who qualifies on paper, who can afford it without slowly bleeding out financially. Because the market will happily approve people who shouldn't say yes. Banks don't need you to be safe, they need you to be approved. And here's the uncomfortable truth most housing videos avoid. The math doesn't break evenly, it breaks suddenly. At first, everything looks fine. The payment feels manageable, the numbers look clean, and then life shows up. So before we talk emotions, before we talk dreams, let's talk about how this system actually works. Because once you see the mechanics, you can't unsee them. In 2026, housing isn't expensive by accident. It's expensive by design. Prices didn't just rise because people wanted nicer kitchens. They rose because the system learned something during the last cycle. It learned that demand doesn't disappear when prices go up. It just gets stretched thinner. Here's how the modern housing machine works. Step 1. Prices climb faster than incomes. That part's obvious. Step 2, lenders quietly extend the timeline. 30 years becomes normal. 40 years gets discussed seriously. When prices go up, payments don't have to, as long as time absorbs the shock. Step 3, buyers stop asking, "Is this smart?" and start asking, "Can I survive the payment?" That's the pivot. That's where affordability quietly changes meaning. Affordability no longer means I can handle this without stress. It means I can pass underwriting. And underwriting isn't designed to protect your future. It's designed to protect the loan. This is why $500,000 doesn't feel extreme anymore. The system trained people to accept it. But here's the thing. A system can be stable while individuals inside it are fragile. Markets don't panic the moment something becomes unsustainable. They wait. So the question isn't whether people can buy 500K homes in 2026. They already are. The real question is who can do it without sacrificing everything else quietly in the background. To answer that, we need numbers. Not scary ones, just honest ones. Let's slow this down. A $500,000 home in 2026. Assume a modest down payment. Assume a normal mortgage rate, not a crisis spike, not a miracle drop. Your monthly housing cost doesn't land gently, it lands heavy. Mortgage, property taxes, insurance, maintenance, the one everyone pretends doesn't exist. Suddenly, you're staring at a monthly number that doesn't care how optimistic you are. Here's where things get uncomfortable. Most stress doesn't come from one terrible decision. It comes from stacking reasonable ones over time. You can afford the payment, but only if nothing goes wrong. Only if your car behaves. Only if your job stays stable. Only if healthcare doesn't surprise you. Only if life stays quiet. The margin for error shrinks. Now layer in real life. Groceries didn't reset. Utilities didn't rewind. Insurance didn't get cheaper. Everything else costs more too. Affordability becomes a narrow hallway. You can walk through it, but you can't turn around. You can't slow down. You can't stop. This is why so many people feel fine at closing, confident, relieved, even proud, and anxious 6 months later. The math didn't change. Their awareness did. A $500,000 house doesn't crush you immediately. It presses, constantly, silently. Pressure doesn't feel dramatic. It feels normal, routine, manageable, until one small thing breaks. And suddenly, normal becomes unbearable. That's when people realize comfort was conditional, stability was fragile, and the payment was never the real risk. The risk was living without margin, flexibility, or breathing room at all. Here's the strange irony. Publicly, housing is framed as stability. Privately, it's more like a stress test. Social media screams, buy now or be priced out forever. The math quietly whispers, buy wrong and you're locked in. These two messages exist side by side, and they shouldn't. Because the folks truly comfy in 500K homes aren't stretching. They aren't betting on last-minute promotions. They aren't hoping inflation saves them. They already have wiggle room. High dual incomes, decent down payments, assets that soften shocks. Everyone else gets told the same story, but lives a different ending. Here's the kicker. The system doesn't break when this happens. It keeps rolling. Payments get made. Loans keep performing. Stress just goes personal instead of systemic. That's why this doesn't feel like a bubble. It feels like quiet exhaustion. People don't panic sell. They trim their lifestyles. Weekends at the lake disappear. Vacations vanish. Savings barely move. Risk-taking becomes a foreign concept. And none of this shows up in housing stats. So when you hear people are still buying 500K homes, remember that line hides a lot of silent trade-offs. The market doesn't care about what you gave up. It only cares that you paid. This is the reality most Americans face. Not headlines, not Instagram flexes, just quiet grind. House payments over lifestyle, dreams on hold, margins squeezed. But the system, it ticks on. And most people, they adapt. They hustle harder, cut corners, sleep less, and somehow they make it work. Even if it costs them comfort, even if it kills joy, even if it leaves them counting pennies at night. This is modern housing in the US. And yeah, it's brutal, but it's real. This is where the question widens, because housing doesn't just shape where you live, it shapes how much freedom you keep. In 2026, a $500,000 home quietly separates people into two groups: those using housing as one part of their financial life, and those whose entire financial life revolves around housing. Same price, very different outcomes. Over time, that gap compounds. One group absorbs shocks, the other avoids them. One group can pivot, the other can't. And this is the part no one can give you a clean answer for. If prices stay high, pressure continues. If prices fall, leverage becomes dangerous. If rates change, timing decides everything. There is no universally right move anymore, only positioning. So when someone asks who can afford a $500,000 home in 2026, the honest answer isn't a number, it's a profile. It's someone with room to be wrong. The uncomfortable thought is this: most people don't know whether they have that room until it's gone. And by the time the math feels brutal, the decision is already behind you. So the real question might not be, can you afford the house? It might be, what does it quietly take from you over time? And is that trade one you're actually choosing or just accepting? If this made you pause, that pause itself is information. Hold on to it before you rush forward, because clarity whispers first, not when it's already too late.